8:01. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to everybody who's joining us live tonight on Zoom, to those watching on the Facebook Live, and those listening to the replay tomorrow on J Air. We'd also like to extend a special welcome to all our Christian Zionist friends who are joining us this evening. We really rely on your support, and we know that the AJ and Israel is very grateful for your support. Tonight, we have the pleasure to welcome Michelle Pearse, the CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby. Michelle is the new CEO of the ACL, which is the largest Christian political organization and has a very impressive track record in lobbying into parliaments and much more. I'd like to remind you, if you've got any questions for Michelle during the talk tonight, you can use the little raise hand button and we will get to you. So please, without further ado, thank you very much and welcome, Michelle.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and thank you for having me. And is this the time where I do a presentation? Is that now?
Yep.
Yep. Great.
The starting gun is fired.
Let's go. Yeah, very privileged to be here. And actually, David, he contacted me before October 7, and we had planned, I think it was actually on October 7 that I was meant to be presenting, but obviously through the horrific events, we've postponed. So really grateful to be here tonight. And just before I say anything else, I just really want to extend really great sympathies to you in regard to what's happened and what continues to happen in Australia with the rise of antisemitism. The heart of all of us at the Australian Christian Lobby and many Christian leaders that we've been in contact with, our heart really does go out to you. We sent prayer points to our database soon after the attacks, and are really thoughtful in terms of how do we ask people to pray, what do we ask them to pray for. And it's been great to be in touch with people like David Adler, who have helped us to get more of an understanding around the issues. To be able to inform, what we do. But the thing, obviously, it's incredibly concerning what's going on in Israel. But as the Australian Christian Lobby, we're really looking to how can we make a stand against anti-Semitism in Australia. And so wherever we can, we've been, connecting our action to that cause. We launched a petition which received over 11,000 signatures, and that's Christians standing against anti-Semitism. I'll be speaking at the Never Again Is Now rally in Sydney this Sunday to show our support as well. So whatever we can do, and it is I think a necessary thing that not just Christians but people all around the nation stand with the Jewish people at this time. And like you, I'm just really surprised and disgusted by what we're seeing going on in Australia. But just know that there is many that stand with you. So as for me, just a little bit about myself. I'm married, been married for 21 years, actually 22 years very soon. I have 3 children, aged 14, 12, and 8. I've always had a big heart for engaging in politics to bring the influence of from my faith in Jesus Christ into politics. So I studied public policy and management when I was young, and with that view of I want to get into this arena, I want to influence. There's a lot of lies that are being told out there, and I want to ensure that I get to speak some truth. And I started working for the Australian Christian Lobby straight after my degree as the WA State Director. I lived in Perth at the time. And it was just incredible how doors opened to be able to influence politics, and how just a little bit of organisation has massive effort in influencing the direction of legislation. I went on to work for a member of parliament for some time as well. And then for the last 5 years, my husband and I have been in London, in the UK, where we have been pastoring a church. So my husband was there leading the church and I was there supporting him. And then the opportunity came for me to take on the role of CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby. So we've moved to Australia to take on that role. And we have over 250,000 supporters on our database. We've been going since 1995. And just through the years, continued to build relationships into all parties. We're non-party partisan. Sometimes that's difficult when some parties come up with some pretty crazy policies. However, that's part of our strategy, is so that we can influence both sides of politics and all parties and all MPs. So I think the reason why, like I said, I became involved is because I'm very concerned about the lies that are being told in culture and the great injustices we see as a result of those lies. naturally I've always wanted to warn people, and it's not because I'm judging them, but it's because I really care about them. And in this position, being involved in the Australian Christian lobby, that heart just wanting to warn people to say, don't believe this, that goes from a personal level to a national level. So now we're ACL's on a platform where we can speak truth at a national level. You know, it's the kind of heart that says, well, these kinds of ideologies, these beliefs are really harmful, the things that we're believing for people, for individuals, but also for society. And so at ACL, we try to show there's a better way. And to address the lies, we need to acknowledge what the lies are, and not just condemn it and disagree with it, but actually point towards a better way, because people don't want to just hear you whinging. They want to actually hear what you've got to say if you've got a better option, a better solution. So I think if I identify 3 lies that the Australian Christian lobby addresses, is the first one is that my quality of life is more important than my sanctity of life. Quality of life more important than sanctity of life. The second lie is that my identity is self-defined, and it is an offense to disagree with my self-defined identity. And the third one is that my sexual desires are of no consequence. So everything that ACL really campaigns on are based around these, addressing these 3 lies in our culture. And that first lie about the sacredness and the sanctity of life is the truth to combat that the fact that quality of life is more important than sanctity of life, is that all life is sacred, all life, because we are all created in the image of God. And that truth bears great consequence. And that's the foundation of why we operate, why we do everything that we do. And the challenge is that we are relating to a culture today that first doesn't realize that it's this truth that actually underpins Western civilization. That's our Judeo-Christian ethic. And it's that truth that's led to the reformation of innumerable unjust practices in the past. And the more that we abandon that truth, the more unjust our society will become. So, you know, nothing else except one creator God who made male and female in his image leads to the understanding that every single human being has inherent value. And we look through other philosophers and beliefs that don't give us these sorts of answers. Plato didn't provide any answers. He believed that we're one with nature and animals. Freud believed we are simply a product of our instinct. The Greek gods are no example. They're fraught with imperfections and provide no example of sacredness. And then atheism, you know, like Freud, provides that we are of no inherent value, only that which we ascribe to ourselves, and even that is subjective. So it's our belief that in a creator God in which we find our identity, and our sacredness is that our sacredness, and in that we place value on all life, no matter who they are. Every single person is sacred. So the Australian Christian lobby will go after the pointy end of these issues. There are many injustices in our society, whether it be poverty or physical, verbal, sexual abuse. There's many things that go on. But the Australian Christian lobby seeks to address those areas in our culture, the areas in our culture that is actually acting in direct opposition to the truth. So on, you know, things like poverty and abuse, there are already many kinds of laws that are in place to protect vulnerable people and to criminalize the offender. And much of these laws actually come from that Judeo-Christian ethic. But there are areas still in society today of tremendous injustice where the law does not support the protection of the vulnerable. And it's in these areas that ACL places its efforts. Our mission is to see Christian ethics influencing the way we're governed, we do business, and we relate to one another as a community. And it's that Judeo-Christian ethic that has influenced the creation of just laws to a large degree in our society today. So we are addressing the areas where Christian ethic has been lost in law. So when compared to previous times in Western civilization, you know, when children would work day and night in factories, we see this throughout just recent centuries. The death penalty was given to, you know, people that were hungry for stealing a loaf of bread. We had slavery where it was normalized to beat and abuse your slaves. Even in past times, pedophilia was normalized. We even think back to the Roman times and the gladiator games when crucifixions were as entertainment. And we've come a long way from then to live in a relatively peaceful period where in large part the law does uphold a standard. However, as we as a society continue to forget our foundations, our Judeo-Christian ethic, and we create a new standard of right and wrong, and frankly, it's based on pride and what we think is human intellect and human ideology, rather than the sanctity or the sacredness of life, our society will become and is becoming increasingly unjust. So we fight to maintain a standard, and this is the standard that all life is sacred, from the womb to the tomb. And so if I go through each of those lies, which we are at the pointy end of our culture, and just unpack it a bit to show why ACL believes these are important, not just for Christians, not just for Jews, not just for religious people, but actually for our entire nation. So the first lie about the quality of life being more important than the sanctity of life. We deeply believe that all life and life in the womb is sacred. From the moment of conception, where a flash of light sparks, at the very moment a human sperm cell makes contact with an egg, it begins to make its journey to the uterus. After just 24 hours, cells begin to divide, which is the earliest forming of the skin and the nervous system, the digestive and respiratory systems, the muscle and skeletal systems begin to develop, and the teeny tiny human attaches to the uterus wall. 4 weeks after conception, the neural tube forms, the brain begins to develop, the head, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth form, just 4 weeks. During the 5th week, buds that will form the arms and the legs appear. Between 9 and 12 weeks, reflexes begin to emerge, and that's when a woman can start to feel the movement. During the 2nd trimester, the heartbeat grows stronger, the fingernails, the hair, the eyelashes, the toenails form. Around 28 weeks, the brain starts to mature faster. The brain and the central nervous system become more responsive. And then from 7 months, it's a fully formed baby that just grows in strength to prepare for life outside the womb. And when I think about the development of a baby, I can't help but think to my own experience. And all of you women who have had a baby can relate, because it's an exciting time. The pregnancy test turns positive, the morning sickness, which makes you feel horrible, but it's a constant reminder that something incredible is happening within your body. The first kick and the hundreds of movements that you feel after that, the stretching of the body as the baby continues to grow, and then that miraculous moment of birth. And I loved my baby from the very first moment I found out I was pregnant, before I knew if it was male or female, before I knew if it was healthy or unhealthy, because I knew whether that child would actually contribute to society or harm society. I don't know. I didn't think about the negative impact the child would have. All I was in love. And yes, when the baby was born, my quality of life decreased. I slept a lot less. I put on weight. I couldn't do the things I used to do for my personal enjoyment, because my whole life was consumed with taking care of this newborn. But I didn't care about quality of life, because all that I cared was about this sacred life that I had been entrusted with. So the reason why I say that is that because it wasn't about quality of life. It was about the sacredness of that precious baby. And the vast majority of abortions occur because of psychosocial reasons, about 98%. And psychosocial simply means for social factors that relate to thought and behavior. So it's a broad term that means any reason is justifiable. And now abortions all across Australia can happen right up until the woman goes into labour for any reason. So it's illegal for a woman, even if she is in labour, if she's booked in for a late-term abortion, for that baby to either be delivered and left to die, because in some states there's no provisions that actually care for a baby once it's been aborted if the baby is showing signs of life, or for that baby to be killed in utero and then delivered dead. And I say this because life of the unborn baby is sacred, and if it is so, then it is indeed a barbaric stain on Western civilization. It's barbarism that we do such an act. And we may be proud of ourselves because we outlawed slavery. We've come so far as a Western society. Look at the healthcare, look at the education, look how far we've come to combat racism. Well, however, the murder of babies in the womb takes place with no legal consequence. The taking a life for psychosocial reasons is akin to the ideology of quality of life over sacredness of life. I do this because my quality of life will decrease. And I'm not talking about situations where it's a very small percentage of babies that are aborted because the mother's life is at risk. That's a question about sacredness of life, not about quality of life. So I'm not talking about those, but the 98% where it is about those psychosocial reasons. The ACL also campaigns against euthanasia. Again, this is an allowance of a law that's based on quality of life rather than sacredness of life. Those who are vulnerable consider their lives worthless. You know, some of those who are really vulnerable think, well, my life is worthless to the point of death. But we who believe in the sacredness of life, the Judeo-Christian ethic that life is sacred, we advocate for worth to be placed on those lives. And there are many arguments in euthanasia that say, well, what about if the pain is too severe? Well, we know that in palliative care that pain management can be increased and actually aid in that dying process, in that end of life process. And there are so many other factors that contribute to pain. And so we tell people that it's holistic. There's psychological pain that contributes to physical pain. So instead of going down the route of euthanasia, we need to continue to improve the holistic care of the vulnerable. It was tragic in New South Wales where they diverted a lot of funds from palliative care to euthanasia. And it just goes to show where our society is heading. And when this position of quality over sacredness forms the foundations of laws around death, then it becomes a real slippery slope. In Canada, drug addicted and mentally unhealthy people can get euthanized. In the Netherlands, also, people can be euthanized for depression, for mental health issues. And this is where Australia will head if we abandon the belief, as we are, that life is sacred. And when we place that principle in law, then it's a slippery slope. The second lie being propagated in our culture is that identity is self-defined and it is an offense to disagree with my self-defined identity. Now we know in the creation story that we were created from dust. But who cares about dust? Dust is annoying. I have to clean my house every week and dust everything. And so dust is irritating. But it's into the dust that God breathed. And by the breath of God, humankind was created. In Genesis, we see that the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. So he created Adam in his image, and he created Eve, male and female. So we understand it's the breath of God that forms somebody's identity. It's the male and female that he created them to bear his image. So it's not the dust that makes humankind of great value. So we all know dust is annoying, but it's the breath of God. And our identity is not found in self, in the dust, not in our dust that we find our security or identity, but it's in the breath of God, male and female being made alive by God's breath. And then our identity is the image of God, that I bear his mark. I am made in his likeness, and my purpose is found in continuously bearing that image to all of God's creation. So when society loses that theological grounding, we begin to search for identity in other means. These days in Western society, we don't have a lot of idol worship compared to Eastern nations, but we all crave to worship something and identify ourselves as something. And, there's actually a sense of relief that people find when they find that thing they identify as. For a person to truly find a sense of belonging in an identity, whether that's they can be a fan of a sports team. Unfortunately, my daughter is a Taylor Swift fan, and she calls herself a Swiftie. So she identifies as a Swiftie, as a Taylor Swift fan. Or whether you're Christian or Jew or whatever it is, that people can identify themselves as this thing that they feel that they are. When we look to the story of Moses, and he says to God, "Who should I say sent me?" when he is to go appear before Pharaoh, and Moses says, "Well, God says, I am who I am." God needs nothing than his own identity, and that's the security we certainly have. We should have in our identity, because we are the bearers of God's image. I am a lot of things. I'm mother, wife, I'm a CEO, I'm female. But none of those things truly define me. What defines me is that I'm an image bearer of God, and my ultimate purpose is to display his splendor. So when people make strong identity statements, like I am lesbian, or I am transgender, or unfortunately I am a cat, or I was talking to my husband about this, and he says, "No, Michelle, it's not cat, it's furry." So people identify as furry, which is, I think it's a cat or an animal, and that's a real thing. But it's because of the thirst for identity. To them, they attach their personhood to this identity and a lot of the time it's their sexual identity now. I am transgender. I'm a male who believes they're female. I am lesbian or homosexual, whatever it is, attaching their identity to these things. And by challenging the identity statement, it's a great offense to them. And that's why we're living in such a highly offendable culture, because people have attached their identity to a certain sexuality. And to disagree with it is to disagree with their fundamental sense of themselves. And it's really sad that one of the common arguments in favor of gender affirmation, which is all over the nation and in some states illegal to not affirm somebody in their gender transition, is one reason they say that we need to be gender affirming is because of the high suicide rates among transgender youth who are not affirmed in their gender. And it's because the very thing they have found their identity in, they've found a relief in that. If you dispute that and question it, then they feel you're actually questioning their whole identity, their self-defined identity. And if that's true, if they can't live as this other identity, then they would rather not live. And that's really tragic and that's terrible. And these poor young people are searching for a foundation, for something to build their lives upon. And when they think they've found it, to question it is highly offensive. And that's why, there needs to be a certain degree of sensitivity around the topic, but not in a way that continues to affirm their identity that they think they have, but to teach that identity is actually not in sexuality. It's not in this biological or gender transition, but it's in the very fact that their life is sacred, that they're made in the image of God. And even a biblical ethos without being a Christian can help with an understanding, but as a Christian, we believe that our identity really is founded in the image of God. The third lie is that sexual desires are of no external consequence. So we see the proliferation of pornography online with the majority of men who watch pornography. We see prostitution, rife within our suburbs, which human sex trafficking is needed to fuel the demand. The adultery and marriage breakdown, the spread of STDs, all of those things that happen when sexual desires have no boundary. We think boundaries around sexuality is repressive, it's old school. And so society tries to find the line of what is acceptable. They say, okay, we could do this, we could do, but don't do that. And so society tries to create these rules around sexuality for a healthy society. And at the moment, thank God, children in law are protected from sexual predators. So pedophilia is a criminal offence. But what about the sexual imagery that is all over the billboards and in advertising? What about the fact that kids can access anything they're curious enough to Google online? What about the fact that sex education in schools is just massively too much information? And describes, in sex education, the multiple ways that sex can be had by all different types of sexualities. This is what kids are being exposed to, children in our primary and early high schools. And this is not of no consequence. This is of significant consequence for our society. In a society that's devoid of understanding the beauty of sex in the confines of marriage, we at the Australian Christian Lobby set out to prove that manifesting sexual desire outside of marriage is harmful. Pornography is harmful, especially for children. And we conduct a lot of research to prove it so. Sexualizing children is harmful. We go to politicians, we'll tell you why these sorts of classification standards we have and allowance of this sort of advertising, no age verification on online pornography. This is why it's harmful. We campaign against prostitution because it's institutionalized rape. It causes post-traumatic stress disorder in its victims. Even when a woman does it voluntarily, even when a child chooses to watch hardcore porn, even though there's choice there, it doesn't negate the fact that they experience significant harm as a result. And all of what I've said about all of these issues, and these are the key issues that ACL campaigns on: abortion, euthanasia, the gender issue, sexuality. They're of great contention in society. We put ourselves right out there to stand and make a stand for truth. And no matter how contentious these issues become, Christians across Australia and all around the world, we will not stop believing it. No matter how far culture moves to the left, there are fundamental Christians who really believe what they believe. As you believe what you believe too. We're not going to change. This is what we believe it's because we care deeply about humanity. And we will continue to want to speak it out in the public. We'll continue to want to put our views online about the sacredness of life, about male and female, about human sexuality. We want to say these things because we care about our nation and about our world. And that's why we care so much about religious freedom. And religious freedom is a huge issue that ACL is campaigning on as well. And it's frustrating sometimes that the language of rights, when we say it's my freedom, my right, it can come across as entitled. I don't like ever being seeming like a victim. I don't like victimhood. I'm not a victim. I'm a victor. But we can come across as victims in the language of rights. But it's not really about rights, and it's not about being victims as Christians or whatever, but it is about the freedom to speak, because we care for our humanity. And I don't want to be constrained from speaking truth about life and identity, because I believe that what I have to say matters, and what we all have to say really does matter. I don't want to be reported because I offended someone or they think I'm spreading hate, when that's not my intention at all. I'm actually saying it because I care. Yet that's a threat. And spiritually speaking, we believe it's a tactic of the enemy to silence the truth, so that injustice can continue to grow. The enemy hates, Satan hates us. And so he wants to see people's lives ruined. And so one way to do that is silence those who speak truth, who speak goodness. Because how annoying, are we Christians, and how annoying are you Jews, that you stand in the way of death and destruction. How annoying. Silence the voice, destroy their institutions, get rid of them so that we can get on with the society that we want to build. They say a society where biological sex is of no consequence, a society where we can kill the unborn for the sake of convenience, a society where I can be free to express my sexuality any way I want, a society where I can do whatever I please. And ultimately, this is a society of pride. A society that abandons God and looks up at the sky, and defiantly shouts, "I will do it my way." So that's where we're at, and they are what I spoke about, the values that really underpin our advocacy on all the issues that we fight for. That's why in WA, just to give you a brief view around the nation, in WA we campaigned against the most liberal abortion laws in the world just a month ago. In Northern Territory, we campaigned against the removal of religious freedoms in Christian school hiring practice. That's why we're actually supporting, there's a good bill in South Australia that criminalises the purchase of sex in prostitution. We're supporting an inquiry into the treatment of children with gender dysphoria. Unfortunately, it just was abandoned in South Australia, but there will be continuing more inquiries around the nation. It's why we're standing against liberalised prostitution laws in Queensland, and in Queensland and Victoria now also they're making the abortion pill easier to access. It's why we're campaigning against Alex Gradich's bill in New South Wales, which includes a whole lot of damaging stuff: commercialised surrogacy, changing sex on birth certificates, decriminalising public sex acts, and removing freedom to support someone to speak against gender affirmation, to support someone out of that lifestyle. It's why we want to see the Lord's Prayer remain in Victoria, to support that Judeo-Christian ethic and woke ideology removed from the education curriculum. It's why we want to retain our freedom to counsel people struggling with their sexuality in Tasmania. There's currently a law there. That's why we want to protect babies who survive abortions, because babies are surviving abortions. They're being left to die with no medical care. And all of these, they're real and current issues that we are actively campaigning upon at ACL. And yes, we come from a Christian worldview. You come from a Jewish perspective, and I'm sure much of what I say actually resonates with you. You also have much of these values. And in terms of collaboration, I think that it's really necessary that groups of like mind do collaborate and do work together. We're constantly strategizing in terms of how we can have more influence in Parliament, the conversations that we need to have. And we go in representing the Christians, but when we go in with a broad group of people from different religions, that makes the statement even more powerful. It's not just us. We represent a certain percentage of the community, but a lot of politics is about numbers. So we campaign a lot in marginal seats on issues. And if we can make representation of a large multicultural or multi-faith group to the MPs, that holds significant weight. So there's definitely much space to collaborate on issues. And so I'd say that if you're interested in being aware really of what the political issues are and want to be informed, to join our supporter base just on acl.org.au to receive our email. So you can take those quick actions, sign a petition, write a letter to your member of parliament, because I'm sure that a lot of what our campaigns are advocating for would be very similar to the values that you also have. And of course, of the rising issue of antisemitism, it's absolutely unacceptable to see the rise of hate. And we will do whatever we can do to awaken Christians around the nation to pray and to stand with you, because we absolutely should. I am really disheartened when I hear of anybody who doesn't stand with the Jews at this time. Of course, we should, and especially with the hate that we see, we stand against hate. That's not a value of a society that we want to be part of going forward in our nation. So we have to make a strong stand against it. But that's all I have to say. Come to a close, and I'm sure there'll be a time for questions. But thank you so much for listening and bearing with me and hearing my passionate plea about the campaigns that we're advocating on. Thank you.
Michelle, look, thank you so much for that. And I do admire the moral clarity of what you're talking about. And you're quite right in the observation that much of what you say is consistent with Jewish values. I'm just going to do our 1 minute promo as we always do, and then we'll come to some questions. So everyone, at the end of the event, if you're not yet actively supporting HAA, make sure you go to the website jewishassociation.org.au, where you can be a supporter, make a donation, make sure you've signed up to the email list if you haven't done that, and follow our social media, which continues to grow and grow. One of our items that we posted on our Twitter in the last week had 1 million views within 36 hours. Which is quite extraordinary. So just to show you briefly what's coming up, next week, by popular demand, we have Yoram Hazony, one of the great thinkers of our time. He's president of the Herzl Institute and chair of the Edmund Burke Foundation. He'll be talking about the virtues of nationalism and conservatism. And I want to foreshadow, unusually, 1 week hence, because we've secured Natasha Hosdorf, who is one of the top international law experts in the world. She represents UK Lawyers for Israel. As everyone knows, Israel has been under attack in the International Court of Justice and various other means. There is no better person to explain the issues and strategies than Natasha, and that's something very much to look forward to. Just before we open the general questions, I'm going to take the liberty of asking Michelle a couple of things, because I emailed her a list after she'd prepared the issues that she was going to talk about, and I don't want her to escape without addressing a couple of them. But during your talk, Michelle, I'll tell you where we have a slightly nuanced difference on one of the issues you touched on very briefly, when you said that there's little idolatry. If by idolatry you mean bowing down to a statue, yes. Our view of idolatry is actually prioritizing something ahead of God's values. So if, for example, your life revolves completely around making money, then you might have idolatry towards money. Or some people, ego and power is what they pursue. And maybe you've come across someone like that in a parliament somewhere, who knows? So that's our view of idolatry.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. That's our view too. I think I was making a reference to the Eastern idol, but definitely, of course. Okay. I tell my daughter not to make an idol of Taylor Swift, that's for sure.
For sure. Okay, I'll just ask you 2 brief things and then open up general questions. One is that since October 7, there's been an explosion of anti-Semitism, which you've commented on, but there's also been an increase in attacks on Christian facilities, we think. We saw the Christmas carols in Melbourne attacked. We saw one of the Christian educational facilities in Sydney, Campion College, that was attacked with Nazi graffiti, the sort of things we've seen on some Jewish facilities. There was a person who took a gun in some shooting incident in America to a Christian facility with Free Palestine engraved on the gun. What's going on there? Why do you think symbols of Christianity are being attacked more since the 7th of October?
Yeah, because I think what's under attack is our Judeo-Christian ethic. I think it's because we do believe what we believe and we're not going to compromise on it. Even like you believe, as you know, I do too, that your land is your land. You're not going to compromise on it. That's what you believe. And the left certainly don't like that. In fact, they hate it. And we see, you know, crazy things like the homosexuals aligning with the extreme Muslims on these sorts of issues, and you just go, well, what's going on? They unite against us because of the things that we believe, and the fact that our belief is so deep that all they can do is attack us because there's nothing else that will change us, and that is not going to change us. The increased persecution actually just makes us dig our heels in deeper, and we have through the ages, and we will continue to do it, and that's what actually makes us continue to survive and thrive.
And I'll ask you to make a comment on I guess the pushing of radical gender theory to children. We've seen it infiltrating the schools. I was shocked to learn that it's in the last couple of years, it's gone through some of the Jewish schools as well. And look, I guess you can say that adults can make their own decisions, but children are our most vulnerable. What should we be doing? What's the ACL doing? What can we do that to protect children from these sort of influences?
I think that the most important thing to do is, if you have grandkids or kids that are in school, is to teach them regularly about male and female, and to have that value within your household consistently spoken about, and so that they know where you stand. And you know, we can't take it for granted that they're just going to grow up, because we grew up just knowing, oh yeah, male is male, female is female. You don't question it, of course it is. But these kids are in an environment 9 to 3, 5 days a week, where that is it's a subversive message, and they're in that environment. And if they don't go to a school that is strong on their values, they could be deceived. And we are hearing many reports from parents who were so shocked when their child come home and say they now want to identify as the other gender, and then they go in and look at the education system, and then they realize, oh my goodness, I didn't realize my child was being taught all of these things. So it's really important at a family level that we teach our young people and our children, but also there's much research that is coming out from other countries that are reversing their stand on gender affirmation and the medicalization of children and teens. And there's leading health bodies, the WHO, surprise, surprise, the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, and the Australian Psychological Society is just about to come out with a statement as well, reversing their previous position on gender affirmation and puberty blockers on children. It's just saying there's limited evidence. There's not enough evidence to say that this is appropriate for children. And so there is a movement toward parental rights. So whenever there's a campaign, an inquiry where we're calling on people to lobby their local member of parliament, it's really important that we do speak to our local members of parliament, because at the end of the day, to get an inquiry up, they need the votes in the House. So we need to get enough MPs voting for inquiries. We can get an inquiry up, which will, no doubt, reveal that this is terrible, the education system, the puberty blockers on children, what's going on in gender affirmation clinics, and the tide will begin to reverse in Australia as well as it is in other nations.
Yeah, there might be a few lawsuits in the pipeline too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reuven, you've got the first question, and can I just remind everyone to make the questions as brief as possible?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Michelle, a lot of the issues that you've mentioned come under the 7 acts of the Noahide Code. Has the ACL looked into the Noahide Code to see how it fits in with your agenda? Because it sounds very, very similar to the whole thing. No?
Please send it to me. I'm sorry, I'm ignorant.
You can Google it. Noahide
Okay.
Code.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anne, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Michelle. Great to see you again. Sorry for much the babies. Anyway, quick question.
Great.
In regards to euthanasia, do you think we'll end up like in Canada where they're now euthanizing or basically murdering the homeless? And also in regards to the gender ideology stuff, I'm working with the Libertarian Party. We're going to be investigating the Tavistock gender clinic in
Good.
UK report soon. Do you think
Excellent.
we can highlight that report in regards to what drugs and surgeries and stuff has been done onto kids and the crimes against
Yes.
children that clinic has done?
Yes, absolutely. And doing all we can to get that information in front of politicians, but also have reports we're developing as well. There is, in every parliament, there's MPs that want to reverse this. So it's just getting enough on side to actually get an inquiry off the table. On euthanasia, so our state, we have a state director in every state who works into the parliament. And what our strategy is we're not going to be able to wind back euthanasia laws right now. But what we are going to be able to do is, we think we can hold the line with enough evidence in front of them. So, and we want to, before elections, we get MPs to make certain commitments to the Christian constituency, then we hold them to it. And so one of those commitments will be holding the line on euthanasia so it doesn't progress and widen to anything other than terminal illness, which is its current restriction.
So Cohen's the label. I've gotten your first name.
Anthony.
Anthony, go for it.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for what you have said. A very famous Jewish writer in recent issues has made the statement that with anti-Semitism, the human being has a lot of difficulty with coping with difference. And that's where we Jews cop it. But I would have thought then, I'm banking on what you was talking to us about, then one way of attacking all of this is to say, no, there's a heck of a lot. We haven't got the same history or...
Anthony, you've got to get to your question.
But if we joined in the things that in 2024 we stand together on, like family values, community values for the sick and elderly,
Okay.
Yes.
we would have a stronger case against the bastards on earth.
Yes, and we want to work together wherever we can on those things that we unite on, even with on some of the issues that that even the left align with us on. Some of them really want age verification on pornography, and so wherever we can collaborate with groups to increase our influence, we'll do so.
Debbie, you're next.
Oh, hi, Michelle. Lovely listening to you.
Thanks.
I just I was wondering, do you have any ideas how we can get the activism, like including the like about gender and that, out of the school curriculums and out of the teachers' colleges?
Yeah, our strategy, and there's people all over Australia working on it, is to expose it, and then pressure for a parliamentary inquiry into it. And I know Senator Alex Antique is trying to get something together for it as well. And also we've got a lady who's researching for us, is excellent. She's exposed a lot of the ways that this has developed through Australian human rights commissions, equal opportunities commissions, how it's become so left, and the public policy is being made on fraught research, on research that's absolutely false. And so we want to get this to an investigative journalist. and just get it out there. And there are journalists out there that are sympathetic to this cause. So it's bit by bit, and we just keep putting the pressure on. And things like the Tavistock, the Tavistock Centre that was in the UK, they were doing gender affirmation treatment, and now it's been closed down because it's seen as harmful. So there's these movements. We've just got to continue to expose the darkness, expose the lies, expose what's going on, get the parliament to inquire on it, the education system, and also we're campaigning. So in Victoria, we've got 1 million flyers that are being posted about the woke education curriculum. We're posting them into marginal seats, where we think that they're in multicultural seats as well, where we think we can have an effect on the election. So play it politically as well.
Oh, it seems like education's a huge issue, and I'll just let people know that in a few weeks' time, we have Senator Sarah Henderson, who's the Shadow Minister for Education. We've already had a private discussion with her about the framing of the coalition's education policy to take to the next election. We think
good.
that's very important. Alan, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, David. Michelle, I think it's probably fair to say that the Jewish community is not travelling at all well with the Islamic community at the moment. I'm just wondering, what sort of interfaith activities do you do, if any, and how's it going? And I guess I'm asking if they're coming after you the way they're coming after us.
No, but we expect they will at some point. So I suppose the interfaith connection we have is if we're going to see an MP on religious freedom, we might take people of other faith groups with us. I know that our guy in Western Australia works with the Islamic leader there, and they go and make representation together. And I've been in some groups, not that we have organised, but others have organised, where we've gone in alongside. There was an Islamic person there as well, and so where we can make a case for religious freedom, we will do. But yeah, I have no doubt that there'll be tensions. And there was, I don't know if you heard of the case in Melbourne where the two Dennies were accused of, that David, of hate speech when they spoke against Islam in Melbourne, and they got taken to the Equal Opportunities Commission and had to go through a whole process. So,
Jeff, you're next, please.
Greetings, Michelle. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah, you're all good.
Okay. I wonder where is the Attorney General, who has a legal obligation to protect the people against their own stupidity, and probably has a moral obligation to give some brains to the medical profession, who should be scared of having legal action taken against them, for the simple reason that they do indeed have an obligation to do no harm. But my fire this evening is to do with the Attorney General, who happens to be Jewish, who actually should know better than to allow harm to come to children, for goodness sakes. When do you think we'll see the first law case?
I mean, there's already detransitioners that we're in touch with that are incredibly hurt and incredibly harmed. It's not going to be long, I don't think, before we see the first case of either a parent or a young adult themselves actually putting something forward, and we'd encourage that and support them.
Harold, you're next, please. You need to unmute, Harold.
Is that me you're talking about?
Yep.
Michelle, thanks. That was great. Love the moral clarity, and you speak very quickly, which is a sign of intelligence. What my question is there a lot of Jewish leaders at the moment, spiritual leaders, who believe that we're in the process of the end of days, where you're going to have good versus evil and the cycle forming up. What I'm interested in is, what would your reaction be if the Messiah comes and not your guy?
I won't even consider that because my faith is so deep that it is.
Okay. Thanks for your talk.
Andy.
Hi, I was wondering what your opinion is about the word Islamic phobia. Is it something that makes us afraid to speak up? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that if we're talking about religious hate, you know, and that can be a real thing when your actions are actually leading you to do something that is really derogatory and pulling somebody down, whether that's verbal or physical abuse. That's what, you know, that kind of thing should be referring to. But what I actually spoke to the Attorney General about when I met with him last week was that because he's wanting to include some religious vilification laws, and I know ACL is concerned that religious vilification laws will lead to the Christians, Jews, whoever actually being reported for making simple statements against another person's religious beliefs. And we should be free to do that. We should be free to proselytize, to evangelize, to say what, and at times, say if Islam continues to grow in Australia, we want to come out and strongly speak against it and expose some of the lies in the Quran and the harmful theology that's within that. And so we have to maintain our freedom to be able to do that. And if that's classed as Islamophobia, then that's something we've got to make sure doesn't become a definition within a religious vilification framework.
Right. Rotten?
Hi there. My question is about things like homosexuality.
Your sound's very problematic. If you've got a microphone, you need to get a lot closer to it.
I'll try. If you can't hear me, I'll just wait for a while to speak. I'll try again. My question is about things like homosexuality.
Yes, what the question?
So my problem is that the Bible is very clear, in my opinion, about this matter. Now, if somebody says, I don't care what the Bible says, that's fine. But I don't hear people like Christians or rabbis from Judaism saying, this is what the Bible says. You can do whatever you like, but don't muck around with what the Bible says. Because I feel that there are a lot of lobby groups, like homosexual lobby groups, they try to distort what the Bible says. I think the Bible about things such as homosexuality, for example, it's very clear. But you don't have that position, that clarity from the religious, being Christians or Jews, to say, this is what the Bible says. You can't, what you're saying about what the Bible says is wrong. That's my question.
Yes, and so we can't go to the politicians who don't have that biblical worldview with that kind of argument, of course, but there's enough common sense and emerging research that shows the damage of such lifestyles. We legalized same-sex marriage. It was in 2017. And back then we were warning about how this is undermining gender and gender roles, male and female. And we're warning about some of the things it would lead to in terms of children's education and the view of gender in society, because that was ultimately the plan, to undermine gender, undermine male and female. Now we're seeing the consequences of that, of the undermining of male and female, and we're seeing the woke gender education in schools. We're seeing kids questioning their identity, and this is a result from same-sex marriage being legalized, being placed in law within our legal system as equal to marriage. So we are where we are because of that. And so we continue to prove the harms, you know, here, even though we've moved on from same-sex marriage here, we prove the harms here to try and wind it back.
Okay. John, you're next.
Hello, Michelle. A comment, caring must involve truth, and there must be freedom of speech in there. Otherwise, we can't care for people. Yeah.
Agree, 100%, and that's where we're coming from, because we care, and it's not, like I said, not like my right and I must maintain my freedom to speak what I want to believe. It's I want to speak because I really care, and I think what I say really matters for a healthy society. We draw the line and we put it out there, and it's the truth that we speak that actually holds society accountable. And the moment we lose our voice, that's when society will crumble, and that's the plan.
Michelle, can I ask you, there's an institution that we haven't mentioned yet, which is very important, and that's the media. We have taken the view that across a lot of the media, There is an anti-Israel bias that has been stoking anti-Semitism, but it's also said that there is an anti-Christian bias in a lot of our media, including the ABC. Is that correct? What's your assessment of the media's approach to issues that concern Christian values?
Yeah, certainly the ABC is the most opposed to Christian values, and they're blatant about it. When I was interviewed on the ABC a couple of times about the Calvary Hospital takeover in the ACT. They clearly took it over because it was a Catholic hospital that wasn't providing abortion and euthanasia, and they wanted it to. They thought it's a publicly half of it is publicly funded. We want to ensure that all of these services are provided. So they took over the hospital so they could provide the full range of services, and completely trod on the religious, not only religious freedom, but freedom of expression of those who work within that hospital to, maintain their conscientious objection to those things. And they believed they had a right to do it, and they admitted that that was the reason why they did it. And when I was interviewed on the radio, there was no way to argue, because they agreed that yes, that was they were doing, and we don't have a right to question that.
Yeah, okay. And well, on communications then, you are aware, of course, that there is a draft bill on misinformation and disinformation as it would affect expression through social media. I've actually read the thing, and I would be very, very concerned about the impact on communicating the sort of values that we're discussing tonight. For example, if a government formed the view that there were 87 different genders or 100 different genders, or however many there are, and some very various permutations and combinations that are inexplicable. And I say, no, hang on a minute, there are actually two genders. Okay, some rare chromosomal abnormalities, but apart from that, there are two genders. Am I providing misinformation and disinformation? Am I vulnerable?
Well, do you think it's reasonably likely to cause or contribute to offence?
Absolutely, 100%.
Exactly.
I could find groups that are immediately offended by.
Exactly. And that's what the definition of harm will be. It's what it was. And we had a conversation with Michelle Rowland and shared our views and put in a submission, as I'm sure many people did. And but I had a good conversation. She says that they'd reduced that concept of harm, or changed it to ensure that people who want to share their religious views aren't targeted through this as their language being harmful. But we'll see. I don't know. She hasn't told me what the definition is, but she said, Michelle, in response to all of the submissions we received, that we have changed the definition of harm. So we'll see what that comes out as. But it is very concerning even to be going in that direction of even having a definition of misinformation.
Yes.
I mean, and disinformation is simply like a lie. It's not disinformation. It's just a lie. Misinformation is the one that's really problematic.
We're getting very close to time, but there's one political dimension I want you to comment on. You say you deal with people across the political spectrum. We do also, but we have an exception. And it'll come as
Is it a colour?
It's a colour.
The outline of my box right now.
How do you deal with the Greens, or do you deal with the Greens?
When I was the WA state director, there were some elements on that you aligned with the Greens on issues where women are exploited, could be in the prostitution industry or through pornography and human sex trafficking. And so we can align on some of those issues, and where we can, and if there's a vote in it that will be on our side on a certain issue, then we'll have a conversation.
Okay, well,
but very limited, yeah.
Well, Tanil, if you're happy to close off the event.
Okay, so thank you so much, Michelle. I noticed somebody in the comments mentioned that they wear their AJ pin everywhere they go. These are our beautiful little pins, if I'm holding that the right way.
Yeah.
They are available on our eBay, and the link will be on our Facebook. It's always in our newsletter. David and I wear ours everywhere as well. They're available for purchase. You get a little group of 5, $40, and they are the perfect thing to wear if you're going to go see Michelle at the Never Again Is Now rally, Sunday, 18th of February. These will be the perfect thing to pick up. And the Never Again Is Now rally, against anti-Semitism, and we're really, really proud to have people in our community and the Christian Zionists who are supporting the Jewish community, who are seeing what's happening, who are opening their eyes and saying this is wrong and fighting with us and for us. So we are really thankful, Michelle, to have people like you who can see a clear definition between right and wrong and are being vocal about it, taking a stand. We only wish there were more people like you in the community and in Australia who are doing the right thing.
Thank you.
So again, thank you everybody who joined us this evening. This will be recorded. It'll be on our YouTube. It'll be on our Facebook page. Please share this with your family and friends. This message needs to be shared. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Good evening.